Been a hot topic lately. And we've recently taken the first step towards working on this stuff, and we about almost 2 weeks ago started dropping all of our RPKI invalid prefixes on our peering edge. So I'm going to skip this slide because we've heard a lot about RPKI and what it is and kind of how it is and why it's good and some things maybe why it's not so good, so we're going to skip that. What I really wanted to talk about was kind of what we did and how we got to that point. So this very basic drawing, we deployed 4 instances of the RIPE v3 validator in 2 different locations, well, 4 instances total, 2 in each of the locations within our network. We established the RTR sessions to our peering routers, those are the IGRs, and they have access out to the world, so they can pull down all the ROAs and all those fun things. So this is kind of what we wanted to walk through. So we first did that deployment, got the ROAs, got the VRPs going out to the routers, so the routers have that validation state. We did a lot of checks to verify, make sure everything's consistent, everything is, the routers are seeing all the state and seeing the same state from all of the RPs out there, and that they were stable and everything stayed up and was working. So, and then you can, at that point, would also be a good time to start integrating some other service checks so that you make sure that your sessions are up like you would do with any new kind of BGP session or policy. The next thing we wanted to do was we wanted to try and understand how that, when we take that next step of dropping the invalids, how is that going to impact our traffic? How much traffic does it impact, and what's it going to do? Am I going to have VPs yelling at me at 3 in the morning and things like that? So we didn't have the fancy new tools that Job has contributed to developing with PMACCT, but which I've linked to down here. So we put in just a regular policy on our BGP sessions to apply a BGP community. Once that BGP community is in place, I can use my standard NetFlow analysis tools to look at that traffic and see what that impact's going to be, what traffic matches those communities. We also started reaching out to several of our peers who had customers that are originating invalid routes and let them know, hey, you guys have customers that are doing bad things. So we were trying to communicate out that this is going to be an impact at some point. One of the gotchas that the fancy new tools take into account that we didn't have the opportunity to leverage, we had to do it manually. You have to watch out for things that have like a valid or an unknown covering aggregate block. So even though the more specific might be invalid, so you're not going to lose connectivity to that when we drop those invalids. The trick is to do the analysis in such a way that it's only impacting the prefixes that you actually are going to completely lose visibility to. We did take an additional step of depreffing those invalids. It had a little bit of impact to decrease some of the traffic and shift it away from those prefixes, but really a lot less than we expected. It's kind of useful to play with and look at. It's not a long-term solution. It doesn't work very well. And then the final step is to drop those packets or drop those routes coming in, which we did a couple weeks ago. What happened? Really, it was almost a non-event. We saw very little impact to the traffic. After doing our analysis, it was in the hundreds of megabits of traffic that we were expected to drop, and that's about what we saw. Handfuls of trouble reports, and I really think that because the RPKI is such an opt-in system that somebody actually had to actively go in and register a ROA and kind of knew what they were doing, then they were, when they found out that their prefix wasn't working within 7018, and it was pointed out, hey, maybe go check your ROA, they were very it was very easy to get them to fix it. We didn't get lots of escalations, people jumping up and down screaming, hey, you broke the internet, don't do that anymore. So it was pretty smoothly. Just a couple of quick observations on what we saw. Most of the invalid ROAs that are out there, it really just seems to be very, it's mistake driven. So far there hasn't been very much operational impact to getting it wrong. So it's very easy for those ROAs to fall out of sync with what's actually in your network, what you're actually advertising. In some cases, we think that maybe some operators may have misunderstood what's supposed to go into the ROA. And in some cases, maybe somebody published for their aggregates, but maybe didn't publish for what they delegated to customers. Lots of different potential reasons. These are just kind of what we thought of, what it looked like probably happened. Seems to have been minimal impact, and so we really think everybody else should, let's get this done. Any questions, please?
Roland Dobbins, NetScout Arbor. First of all, kudos to AT&T and to NTT. This has been fantastic news recently with the RPKI stuff. I know this is a lightning talk, but could you talk just a little bit about any of these significant layer 8 hurdles that you had to go through to get permission to do this, and anything that you think might also, other operators might need to keep in mind as they start down this path internally?
Yeah, so this was our experience with what we did. We had to really sit down and do that analysis and see what that traffic is going to look like. And it's really pretty specific to our customer cone and the networks externally that they would want to be able to communicate with. And so the intersection of that with the invalid ROAs that are out there seems not to have been high. So you have to do the analysis yourself and make that justification to your own management to see that that it works. But once we laid out what we expected it to be, and we made sure that we had all the things covered to notify their operation centers, so that if we did get problem reports, that somebody would know how to look up, is this an invalid route, prefix, or anything like that. It was fairly straightforward to get that approval to make that step.
Don Smith, CenturyLink. First off, when you did the depref, were you able to collect a lot of metrics, a little metrics, or not many?
We didn't have a lot of metrics on that, but anecdotally, when we made that change, there was very little change in the prefixes for what was the best path. Very little change in that respect, which makes a lot of sense when you go back and look at it, because most of the invalids that we were seeing were in fact the longest match.
And it's clear that you would have, but the depref you did was as low as you could go, basically, or pretty darn low.
It was pretty darn low, yeah.
Doug Montgomery, NIST. First, congratulations. Second, I want to remind everybody to be careful about using the term invalid ROA when you really mean invalid route, because
yes.
it's the source of infinite confusion in this field.
Yes. Anybody else? Great.